everybody, this is 𝗚𝗫𝗀 Nathanson, child therapist and founder of confidentchildren.co.uk. So today I have a very special guest. This is Gaye James, and Gaye actually has a child with selective mutism, but an adult child. So her son is now an adult, although he had selective mutism as a child. So we have the honour today to discuss Gaye's experience of having a child with selective mutism and actually going all the way from the early stages to now her son being an adult, and really delving deep into her experience. And actually, Gaye has also recently written a book about her experience, so she'll be sharing a bit about that as well, which is super exciting. So thank you, Gaye, for being here, first of all.
Thank you so much, 𝗚𝗫𝗀. It's wonderful being here. I appreciate the opportunity to say hi to all of your viewers and to share my story and offer hope to those out there that are struggling right now.
Oh, great, thank you. So let's start off. How old is your son right now?
My son is now an adult. He is 23 years of age. So he's come a long way in that amount of time.
Right, yes. So could you share a bit about your story? So how did you find out that your son had selective mutism, and how old was he at the time?
So, thinking about it, I'm not quite sure if this relates to selective mutism, but when he was 10 months old, he sort of withheld some affection towards me. He didn't hug his own mother and didn't want to give me kisses. And it lasted about a month and a half. And during that time, he did give his brother hugs and his father hugs and kisses. And so, I was the only one that he didn't show that affection to, and I was the one who was around all the time. So it kind of confused me. But it was a little different, something that kind of stood out. But at the time, I had no idea. And again, I don't know if that has to do with selective mutism, but as far as the speech issues, that really didn't surface until, of course, he was able to talk, because a 10-month-old isn't really talking. But when he was about 2.5 or so is when we started noticing he wasn't really as chatty around other people, but I passed it off as his personality. He's probably just shy, because you don't really know yet, a child that young, what their personality is. So life went on, we continued, time passed, and then we took him to a babysitter. I returned to work, and the babysitter started noticing that he was talking downstairs to the little girl that was younger than him. And when he would come upstairs, his voice didn't come with him. And that was kind of, disconcerting for her. And she brought it to my attention. And I just thought, well, maybe he's, the babysitter, he's just shy around her, an adult. And it's easy to make those excuses because you don't know that something's wrong. And who wants to admit something's wrong, right, with their own child? And he entered preschool, and the preschool teacher actually approached me and asked me, how do you get your son to speak? And I'll never forget my reply. I was like, well, when you figure that out, can you let me know? Because I was flabbergasted. I mean, what is going on here? Something isn't right. How can a child, preschool's only 3 hours long, but how can you go 3 hours and not talk? It just didn't add up. It didn't make sense. He's so chatty at home. He's so chatty, with his brother and then my best friend's daughter. So it was around, preschool years when we realized, but we still had no name for that. I didn't know. I just couldn't put it together. So time kind of passed. And then the babysitter one day was so excited because she had watched a talk show and it discussed selective mutism. And when I picked up my son up that day, she was just over the top with excitement. And she handed me this note, and she had jotted it down, the word selective mutism. And I remember reading it, and I couldn't read her writing. I was just like, sand notes mints, what is it? So she had explained. And then I thought she said selective autism, and she had to clarify. And so I was kind of confused. So I went home and got on the internet and tried to do my own research to figure out, what is this? And there really wasn't much information available, but fortunately there was some. And so I read that, and I was amazed. My son, he fit like every single category that was under, the selective mutism. And it was this light bulb that just went off. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it. So we immediately scheduled, with a child psychologist. And unfortunately, there weren't any in the area that had experience with selective mutism. And I think that's still kind of the issue today, but this was a lot of years ago, about almost 20 years ago. But the child psychologist we went to thought it was autism. He had to rule that out, thought it might be ADD, attention deficit disorder, had to rule that out also. And he had to collaborate with a few other co-workers, other psychologists from different areas that did have experience with selective mutism, and finally gave us a definitive diagnosis of selective mutism. So then we knew we had the label, we knew what was wrong, and then we could begin our journey to recovery. So
Wow.
It was an exciting moment, but it was also scary because, you know, you're like, oh my gosh, yay, I figured out what it is. And then you say, oh no, now what am I going to do?
Yes.
You know, then the panic that, you know.
Yeah, and there was even less awareness 20 years ago. You know, we think there is enough awareness now, but imagine 20 years ago, it must have been even more overwhelming. And, you know, where do I even start? So, wow. So how old was your son when you got the diagnosis?
So he was 4.5 when we finally got the diagnosis, almost 5. It was during preschool. And yeah, so we had already, a couple of years into it, had already realized there were things not quite right. But it's, you know, it's just so difficult as a parent to admit, you know, first that something's not quite right. And then when you know something's not quite right, you're like, well, maybe they'll grow out of it. So, you know, time just kind of passes. And we were very lucky. I feel very lucky that the babysitter saw that episode. I mean, the fact that it was even on TV and brought that to my attention. I truly don't know how many years would have gone by had we not been given this term, and had I not been able to research information. And, you know, we were just, like I said, very fortunate that we could figure it out right away.
Absolutely. So from that moment, at 4 years old, your son was 4 years old, you got the diagnosis. What were the next steps from there? What was your journey to actually helping your son to start to make those steps forward with talking?
So we took him to the child psychologist, who didn't have experience with it, but he did his research. He tried to help the best he could. The information, after diagnosing, he saw my son a couple of sessions, and he just kept stressing, and he met with us, with, you know, the mom and dad, and explained to us the most important thing you can do, or you should do, is do not bring attention to your son if he speaks or if he doesn't speak when he's out in public. You know, when he's in a situation he doesn't normally talk, if he uses his voice, act like he always uses his voice. If he doesn't use his voice, just move on. And that's what he stressed to us. And so, you know, we began the process to do treatments there in the office. And one day we were waiting on the psychologist for our appointment, and my son was playing in the waiting room and just happily having a great time and chatting away and telling us about the trucks, and, you know, and all of a sudden the psychologist opened the door and he said, "I heard you speak and nothing bad happened." Oh, my son, oh my gosh, you could just see this change in this transformation. This happy-go-lucky child, you know, was having so much fun, and instantly he just retreated into himself, and his face went pale, and he just kind of tried to hide behind me, and he didn't want to go into the office. And he had been having fun in the doctor's office before that time. And I realized, you know, the doctor was hoping that was the right thing. At the time, it was not. He went against what he had told us to do, but you know, sometimes we make those mistakes. And unfortunately, my son regressed for a little while. We didn't go back to the doctor's office. I decided at that point I was going to do even more research, and I got all the books I could find at the library, and because back in those days you had to go in the library to get books. So it was crazy. So, but I had this big stack of anything anxiety related and you know, selective mutism, and I said, I'm going to do this. And I think, you know, having a medical background myself and a lot of psychology classes I had taken in college, I think that really helped. And I didn't know a lot of the terminology that they use nowadays for the types of treatments, but we were treating him the whole time, and he did it. We we made it through to the other side, and he found his voice. He was mute in school for about 3 years, well, 4 years, preschool, kindergarten, first grade, and he started talking in second grade, but it was, very few, just maybe 1 or 2 friends. And he did answer the teacher when he had to, like when they called names to make attendance. And then by third grade, he appeared normal, like nothing had ever happened.
Wow, amazing. So you actually took the reins and took charge of his therapy, really, when there was so little knowledge at the time. That's incredible. Absolutely incredible. And there was no YouTube like there is today. This video is on YouTube. People are able to access these resources that you didn't have access to at the time.
Right.
Wow, it really puts it into perspective. Amazing. So what were the struggles that you faced in getting support and help for your son?
Well, just the lack of knowledge. I mean, that was the absolute biggest struggle. No one knew what selective mutism was. I mean, even the child psychologist that we went to didn't really know. So everywhere we went, people would just give those, unhelpful, comments they would make about, oh, he's just shy. And, that's selective mutism is not a personality trait. He wasn't just shy. He wasn't shy at all. My son loved attention at home, and when he was around friends, loved it. He thrived on that. And so to see him change into this, I don't know, almost like a shell of a person, this little body just not responding. And it was just astonishing. But so people would comment. They would be hurtful comments sometimes, oh, you woke up on the wrong side of the bed, little man. And and they would keep trying to give him attention. And so I would do my very best to redirect the attention away from him when we were out in public and talk about something else. And that was the only, I didn't want to talk about selective mutism in front of my son, because even though I hadn't read this online because there wasn't enough information, I felt, that it was important he wasn't labeled, that he didn't have this word attached to his whole being. And if he was called the child who didn't talk, he would always be the child that didn't talk. And that terrified me. So I thought, no, he's my son. I have 2 sons. He's just one of the other sons. And so we tried not to make any kind of a big deal. We tried not to mention it in front of him at all. He already knew he was different. He didn't need to be called different. So that was the biggest approach that we took for his treatment, and to get past the struggles of no one else knowing. The coaches on the teams, he played soccer, he played ragdoll, t-ball, and the coaches loved having him on their team because he didn't talk. They thought he was listening really well, had no idea. And I would tell the coaches, I'd pull him aside and explain, his situation. And they always gave me this look like, had no idea. What is this lady saying? So, but at least they did treat him pretty much like the other kids. And, but that was the biggest struggle, is not enough awareness.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And funnily enough, it's quite unbelievable. That was 20 years ago. And it's even today, people still make those unhelpful comments, and there's still that lack of awareness. We're doing as much as we can to spread awareness, and it is getting a lot better. But yeah, unfortunately, those situations still arise, which is quite unbelievable. Okay, so what particularly helped you in helping your son?
Well, I think the fact that I had a background, medical background, helped me be a little more receptive and understanding. Psychology was always an interesting subject for me. So I realized early on that he was not doing this on purpose. He did not ask to have this anxiety disorder, and it was not his fault. Yes. And realizing that, I was able to not take it personally. We think that when our children don't act a certain way around others, that's a reflection of the parenting skills. And so oftentimes, you try to make excuses or whatever because, you're embarrassed by what your child is doing. And so I think I realized early on that he's a different person, and he didn't ask to suffer through this. And I'm still a good mother, even though he's struggling. And so the best way I can be the best mother is to understand him and to be compassionate and help him through this instead of making excuses and denying. So I think
that's a really good message, because quite often parents will say to me when we have our sessions that they feel really guilty, and did I contribute to this? Is there something that I should have done differently? And how did I not catch it sooner? And, you know, and all this guilt that parents often have. And I always reassure parents that, you know, how could you have known to act any differently? Because, you know, you weren't aware, you know, you didn't know that it was selective mutism. And if you had known, of course, you would have researched sooner, but you didn't know. So there's, you know, you did the best that you could, and that's all you can do. And now that we know, we can take action accordingly. But there's, you know, there's no good in feeling guilty or placing blame on yourselves. Yeah, great. Okay, so now that you've gone through this experience, what would be your key message for schools or parents who currently have a child with selective mutism?
So I think that the teachers, the schools, and anyone involved with the child really needs to be aware that they're not trying to be defiant, that they're not, you know, trying to be disrespectful or rude, because that's how they oftentimes appear, and that this is truly an anxiety disorder, and they need to be treated like every other child. Oftentimes, if a teacher is aware of a child that has a certain issue, sometimes they give them too much attention, and that's not good with selective mutism. I mean, too much attention and too little attention, either extreme is bad. So trying to treat them just like any other child, give them an opportunity to answer their questions. If they don't answer within a few normal paused seconds, move on to the next child, or do, you know, say something else. Also, you know, maybe placing their desk in a different place in the room, maybe away from the teacher's desk or away from the door, because there's a lot of activity going on, and that might help reduce their anxiety if you can put them not in the corner, because you don't want to hide them, you know, but closer to the corner. So there's some things that, you know, they can do, but the main thing is to treat them like anyone else, because they are, you know, like anyone else.
Yes, great. And would that be your same message for parents, or would you have a slightly different message for parents?
Yeah, well, parents, don't take it personally. It's not your fault. I mean, maybe there's a chance that they inherited this. I mean, there is that possibility, but, you know, you wouldn't choose to give your child, you know, a disorder or an issue. You wouldn't choose that for them. They didn't choose it either. It's not your fault. We can't help it. This is the way they are. So start with the now and move forward from there. Be understanding. You know, just try real hard to not judge them, not to say, why can't you do this? Why, you know, you get so frustrated sometimes because they're not responding a certain way, but it is not their fault.
Yes, and there's so much that we can do to help them wherever they're at right now. Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Gaye. So you've gone through this whole journey from that moment that the babysitter showed you that piece of paper with selective mutism written on it, then trying to research, finding that child psychologist, and then going to the library and, you know, doing your own research, and then helping your son. And now your son is, you said, 23 years old. So would you say that your son has now overcome selective mutism?
I would say that he has overcome selective mutism as far as the verbal part of it. So to me, selective mutism is, because it's an anxiety disorder, the anxiety continues for an entire lifetime. Anxiety doesn't go away, but the majority of the selective mutism, of the non-speaking, that is the biggest symptom we see. And then the eye contact and, you know, participation, all of that he has definitely overcome. He has made some amazing strides. When he was in the 5th grade, he wrote an essay in school, and it was chosen out of all the 5th graders for him to read at an assembly in front of the entire school.
Wow. And he did that?
And that was only a few years into his recovery of being able to.
Wow.
It was terrifying for me as a parent, because I just thought, oh my gosh, you know, I get scared with public speaking. So, and I don't have selective mutism, and oh my gosh, how is he going to feel? And so I was so frightened that day. And he got up there. Now his voice was tiny, and you know, he kept his face hidden in his paper, but he did it. He read his speech in front of the entire school. So that was huge. And then as he got older, he into high school, he was in the marching band, and he wanted to try out for drum major, which is the position of the person that stands up and guides the band, you know. And so I actually asked my husband, you know, should we tell the band director that he has selective mutism, and maybe that'll give him an edge and help him, you know, be chosen for this position? And then my husband, playing devil's advocate, said, well, wait a minute, it might actually make him not want to select him, because he might be afraid he can't speak, because it's a very powerful position, a leadership position, being drum major. And they have to shout out commands, you know, to the entire band. They have, you know, call you to move over there. And then afterwards they give the pep talk on what they did or didn't do. And so amazingly, my son made it. He was chosen, and he represented more than 200 kids he had to speak to on a regular, every single practice. And sometimes he would stay after, and he would, you know, sort of coach some of the kids. And he was an amazing leader. So that's where I say, you know, he absolutely was not shy.
Gosh.
But to see that child go, you know, reverting back to this little pale-faced, you know, 4-year-old hiding behind my legs, not being able to even look at the preschool teacher, not being able to move. I mean, just frozen with fear. At that moment, I never imagined my child to be a leader. You know, I couldn't fathom that. All I could do is live in the moment and expect that's the way life's always going to be, even though I knew it wasn't going to be. I was determined to make sure it wasn't, you know, going to be. So to see him make such accomplishments, I was just, I'm in awe still of him.
Yeah, that is incredible. Absolutely incredible. Wow. And he must have such, well, I wonder, like, from what you said, it sounds like he's built this resilience. And I wonder, just hypothesizing, whether because of his early experience, perhaps he's now perhaps even more resilient because he's gone through such a challenge so early on in life.
And he also, after he graduated from high school, he joined an orchestra, and it's called Ohio Ambassadors of Music. And they travel. We're here in the US and in Ohio, hence the name of the orchestra. And they traveled for 3 weeks throughout Europe and played concerts. And he didn't know a single person in that orchestra when he tried out, and he was selected to play his trumpet. And he traveled abroad, I mean, and was away from home almost a month. It was about 3.5 weeks. And I was terrified, because I thought, oh my gosh, he's so far away from home, and with this anxiety, what's going to happen? And he did fine. He was like, he didn't talk to us every day, but he would communicate, you know, when he could get the Wi-Fi signal, and he would say, I'm fine, everything's great. And he was so excited. Oh, and then he was in, I guess it was somewhere in Germany, and they went to a pizza shop, and he was with 2 or 3 other young men, and they wanted to order the pizza, and they were trying to find out the price of the pizza. And there was only a teenager working at the pizza shop, and the teenager apparently didn't speak English. And my son he took German, 2 years of German in high school. And so he was the only one that had any kind of German experience. And so it was like on him to order and to figure out how much this is going to cost. And he did it. And he was ecstatic when he called me. And so here he is, you know, this person that didn't used to be able to talk, and now it was all relying on him, and he did it.
That is incredible. This just gives so much hope to parents who are watching this video, who are currently in that phase where maybe their son is 4 years old or 7 years old or 10 years old, but unable to talk, and in some situations, and to hear that you were there and now your son, you know, achieved all of this is just so reassuring. Wow. Thank you for sharing all of that. So I'm aware that you've written a book and it's going to be released in the next few days, which is super exciting. So could you tell us a bit about it, please?
Yes, I would love to. Thank you for asking. So my book is all about my journey. And I say my journey. It was my son's journey. I understand that, but it was through my eyes. This is what I experienced watching a child and raising a child through the journey of selective mutism. And so it's just hoping to give an insider's view so that, and to offer hope to others, to say, look, we were so sure that, you know, he might never improve, and we were there, and look how he's done, and to kind of give an idea of what we did to help him along. And I asked my son if he would, I obviously asked if I could share the story, and he said yes. But I asked him to create an image for the cover. I really thought that would give a more personal touch. And I wanted something to kind of represent him as a child when he, you know, was dealing with selective mutism. And so he created this image, and I have to show you. So the book is called Living Beyond the Silence. And here is the image he created. I don't know if you can see it with the light on there, but there's my son as a little boy, and he's standing in the darkness of selective mutism, the darkness of the anxiety, facing the future of hope. And it gives me tingles when I look at this. So I love it.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, he did a great job.
Yeah, definitely. Now, would you be happy to share an extract from your book?
Yes, I would. Thank you. That would be awesome. I would love to read the introduction. And
yes,
I'm trying to, in this introduction, I was just trying to give a feel for the readers, to let them know when I didn't know there was something wrong, and then I did know. And then, you know, kind of our first experience, the major episode of the selective mutism. So I do need to put on my eyeballs, okay, to be able to read this. All right, so the introduction is called Meeting Selective Mutism. The sun shone down, reflecting off the pavement and lighting up the sidewalk leading to the preschool building. All the parents proudly marched their children toward the first day of school. Some of the kids' excitement converted into energy. They jumped off the brick wall surrounding the flower garden or the large rock near the path heading back to St. James Preschool, which was hidden behind the church. The air buzzed with heightened emotion, and smiles were shared by everyone around. It was day one of their new life, and all the children embraced the upcoming adventure. I glanced down at my 4-year-old son's precious face. He was wide-eyed and interested. Today was the beginning of something new and mysterious. We shared a smile over the unknown possibilities this moment held. Trevor had been looking forward to this his whole summer. Ever since we signed him up, preschool had been his main topic of conversation. He often would tell his big brother, Josh, all about what he was going to accomplish when he began. Josh would share stories about his preschool days some 4 years earlier, while his little brother soaked it in like a sponge. I imagine Trevor wanted to reenact many of Josh's tales, hoping his experience would live up to the same level of hype. Although, after our tour a few weeks prior, Trevor's focus was the treehouse room. He couldn't wait to climb up the ladder and slide down the slides. And to be honest, that room spoke to me too, calling me to join in on the fun. I mean, who wouldn't want to climb a tree that filled an entire room with slides emptying into the center onto colorful padded floor mats? A witch approached, startling us out of our imaginations. Mrs. 𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏 had been the lead preschool teacher for more years than Trevor had been alive, possibly even longer than I had been alive. The wiry, jet black-haired woman smiled warmly, and her deep eyes held a story of wisdom and experience. Her witch's hat caught the attention of all the nearby children, which was apparently her intent. They were drawn to her, intoxicated by her eccentricities. Trevor gazed upon the scene, engrossed in the interaction between the other children and his new teacher. She spoke briefly to each family, trying to spread love and reassurance while introducing herself to each member of the new class. Mrs. 𝗀𝗏𝗃𝗀𝗃 smiled in our direction as she made her way through the swarm of people toward us. She nodded at me, then turned her full attention to Trevor. "Hi, I'm Mrs. 𝗀𝗏𝗃𝗀𝗃. I'm your new teacher. What's your name, young man?" Knowing my son's high level of excitement about today, I expected to hear him answer with an enthusiastic Trevor, but instead, his little arms tightly clung to my leg and his face paled and eyes widened. He stood there, frozen like a deer in the headlights of a car, unable to move. The smile on Mrs. 𝗀𝗏𝗃𝗀𝗃's face wavered for a moment, but she promptly regained her composure. After she glanced down at her roster, she deduced which child was standing in her presence and said, "I believe you are Trevor. Is that correct?" Pausing a moment in anticipation of his answer, her query was met with silence from my petrified child. He gave no response, not even a nod in confirmation from the tiny body still attached to my leg. "Yes, this is Trevor," I answered. He's a little shy, overwhelmed by all the excitement, I think." The excuse flowed smoothly from my lips as my motherly protection mode kicked in. But he wasn't shy. Not my son. He seemed to love attention at home. Looking back at that moment, I now realize why he responded so dramatically. Trevor has selective mutism. But at that time in 2001, I was dumbfounded by his reaction. I suppose starting from the beginning would be the best approach to explaining our journey through this speech paralyzing anxiety and how we helped our child learn to use his voice again.
Oh, thank you so much, Gaye.
Thank you.
Oh, that's it's so relatable to parents. So relatable. I can't wait to get the book myself and read it. That's just had tingles. Like, yeah.
It's available anywhere books are sold. Amazon, but a lot of the local bookstores are also carrying it.
Great. So when will the book be available?
It's available now. It's officially released the 18th, but it's available now.
Amazing. So I'll put the Amazon link to the book in the comments below so that parents can very easily find it and get a copy and carry on reading. That's super exciting. Oh, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
So, is there any last words or anything else you'd like to share or about selective mutism, anything you'd like the world to know before we finish?
Well, something that I had a conversation with my son, while doing my own research, writing the book. So I asked him to explain to me about the fear of selective mutism, and he said he didn't think it was fear. He said, "It's not fear." He said, "It's something different." And I said, "But to me, it looks like fear. Your body responds exactly the same as it would if you were afraid." And so, there are some older, teenagers and adults who just don't associate selective mutism with fear. And I think it's because to them, fear is something more tangible, something, you fear spiders, you fear, something physical. And so it's hard to kind of pinpoint that. But I think, our amygdalas in our brain respond, that's the part in the brain that helps your body react quicker without having to think about things. Like, if a snake were to fall out of a tree, then, oh my gosh, my amygdalas kick in and perceive this threat and say, run, run, run. And I'm going to run and scream. I'm going to scream first and then I'm going to run. But, so with selective mutism, I think it's perceived as fear. Someone speaks to them, they call their name, they give them attention. Automatically, their brain interprets that as this is a threat. And the signals, get sent and causes everything, the shutdown. It causes the sweaty palms. It causes the nervous, butterflies in the stomach. It causes the paralysis of the vocal cords, and they can't move. So to me, I believe it is, whether it's fear or not, their bodies respond as if it's fear. So that's something that I feel that not everyone thinks about in that aspect.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for sharing that.
So I started a Facebook group about selective mutism, and it's actually the title of the book. It just, at the time, I was still working. Well, I almost had my manuscript ready, but I thought, I just love the title, Living Beyond the Silence, because that's kind of what they're doing, right? And so it's called Selective Mutism, Living Beyond the Silence. And the Facebook group was just my attempt to reach out to those that are struggling with it, whether they're struggling with it themselves or they're parents of a child that has selective mutism, and just kind of give a safe place for them to be able to discuss any issues they may have, and you know, to just have friends, you know, that are dealing with the same thing. And during the month of October, which is Selective Mutism Awareness Month, I really pushed to try to push awareness. And within the group, I gave different files. I did story time, reading books, and I got to read 𝗬𝗬𝗀, your book was awesome. And so the people really loved it and responded well. But I also have a couple of files available for people to use. One is I created some wallet cards, and they say, you know, there's two versions. One says, I have selective mutism, and then it kind of briefly explains it. And the other one says, my child has selective mutism, and it briefly explains. And the whole purpose of that is, in my mind, to because you don't really want to bring attention to the fact that they have selective mutism out in public, right in front of them. So because you don't want, to me, I didn't want to label my child. So I think that you know, is the best approach. And so if your child is right there and the person, a cashier or someone you're talking with, makes a comment and, you know, says, oh, well, they're awful shy today or something, and then you distract and say, oh, you know, they talk at home, they're fine. And then you finish your conversation, and as you're leaving, you can hand them a card, and then they can have that information. And so I thought that might be very helpful. And also there are pamphlets on there. I was giving away stickers in the group that during that month for the awareness month, and it says selective mutism awareness, and they're these little circle stickers my son created, and it's kind of cute. And I put one on a magnet, and I put it on the back of my car, and I was absolutely amazed. I didn't expect this to happen. My expectation was that people would be parked, you know, stopped at a light, and they might see, oh, selective mutism, what is that? And then when they get a chance, Google it later, you know, and figure it out. But somebody actually stopped me in a parking lot, and they said, oh, wow, what is selective mutism? And I'm like, I was so happy to tell them, you know, and I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. So I was able to teach one person, so it was worth it. So that was really
absolutely
fun. Yes. And then I have a website, gayjames.com, and within that website, I have just different posts that I've put on about different, you know, struggles and with selective mutism and with my son, so I guess you know, reaching out and helping others and spreading awareness is, to me, is most important. If people don't have a name to it, if they don't know what it is, you can't fix it. You know, you have to know what's going on in order to move beyond it. So I think that awareness is the #1 most important factor with dealing with selective mutism.
Yes, 100%. Wow, thank you so much. So if anybody is you know, watching this video, please hop over to Facebook and like Gaye James's group called Selective Mutism, Living Beyond the Silence. And it sounds like there's a lot going on there. So yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much for taking part in this interview, sharing your experience, and I'm super excited for your book, to read your book. Thank you so much, Gaye.
Thank you so much, Lucy. And thank you everyone for watching.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found it useful. Remember to like the Confident Children Facebook page called Confident Children Selective Mutism Therapy, where I regularly share resources, videos, articles, and everything selective mutism. And also have a look at my website called confidentchildren.co.uk. Thank you so much for watching, and have a lovely rest of the day. Bye.